G'day there everybody, Stephen from Web Design with .NET again. I just wanted to do a screencast today on using SASS, specifically how to use SASS within a Visual Studio MVC project. So the basics of SASS, if we go to the SASS website, there's a few different impressions on what SASS stands for. I think the general understanding is that it stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets, so SASS. Now, file extensions for SASS can either be SASS or SCSS. Both extensions will work. I generally use SCSS with my file extensions instead of just a straight CSS on the end of your style sheets. Before we jump in, I might just bring to your attention a change that's happened on our website. I've had a redesign. Hopefully this is a bit cleaner and a bit easier to navigate. Essentially, the main reason for doing this is because previously the Web Design with .NET site was a combination of the blog as well as marketing and promotion for my web design business, Woolston Web Design. So it became a little bit cloudy and a little bit confusing, so what I've done is I've separated the two out. So Web Design with .NET is now specifically it's uniquely the blog with all of the blog articles, and the Web Design Business Promotion is now at its own URL at woolston.com.au. So feel free to have a look at both of those sites. So let's jump into the screencast. So we've talked about SASS. Go and have a look at some of the documentation. First of all, SASS is what's called a CSS preprocessor. So what that means is essentially you can write some CSS in a particular structure, and once that SASS structure is compiled, it compiles down to normal CSS. Probably the best way to explain this is if I go to this CodePen pen that I've created. So what we have is a div with a class of parent. Within that we have a div with a class of child. So it's a child of the parent element. And then we also have a horizontal rule, and then we also have a standalone div with a class of child. So if we look at the CSS here, you can see that this is just standard CSS written in the CSS pane. So all divs will have padding of 10 pixels. Any div that has a class of child will have a background color of green. You can see that there, but you might notice that this is also a div with a class of child, but it has a background color of blue. We'll come to that in a moment. So all divs with a class of parent should have font size a little bit bigger and a background color of orange. So you can see the parent there has a background color of orange. It has 10 pixels padding within it, and then the child. So that's why we have a 10 pixel orange sort of surround around the blue element, is because the child background color is layered over the top of the parent background color. So the parent div does have orange all the way through, it's just that the blue makes it kind of look as though it's just got a border, an orange border around the outside. I hope that makes sense. So the reason that the two child divs have different colors is because we've said here all child divs should have a background color of green, but then there's this descendant structure which says if there's a div of child that is a descendant of the div of parent, give it a background color of blue. So we can target the same classes but in a different in a different layout, in a different position within the DOM. And I've also said that if the child element is within the parent element, when we hover over it, give it a background color of yellow. So that's pretty standard CSS. Now what SASS lets us do is we can, amongst other things, we can nest CSS. So what I've done is in CodePen, if I click the settings, I can say give me a CSS preprocessor of SASS or SCSS. So there's all of these other preprocessors that are also available. Less is a pretty common one, but we're just going to look at SASS for the purposes of this screencast. So let's have a look at how to nest our CSS in SASS. So let's start with our parent. So we have a parent selector. Okay, now we can, by nesting our elements, we're essentially saying exactly what we have here. So we have a parent, and then within the braces of the parent class, we say then anything that is a child. So now we can take this, I'll get rid of that, and we can put that in there. So you can see we have exactly the same outcome as what we had before. If we view compiled here, you can see that this is what the CSS will look like after it's compiled. You can see we have exactly the same structure as what we had before. And we can further extend this as well. So there's different kind of keywords or characters within SASS that give us specific functionality. So there's things like the greater than, which is a direct descendant. There's the plus symbol, which is siblings. So if we were to say child, we don't have these classes, but if we were to say child plus child 2, then do something as well. So that will if that would work if we had this use case. If this was 2 and that was 1, so we could say then give us a color of pink. Now we're not going to look at that. What we want to use is the ampersand character. Now what this gives us, that's actually in the wrong place. What this gives us is the ampersand essentially says print or maybe echo the parent class name. So if we were to say ampersand hover, and if we take this guy, and get rid of that, and we need to change this back to, just undo some of the stuff that I did here. So here you can see now we have exactly the same structure as what we had before. If we view the compiled CSS, we have parent and child, and we have parent, child, hover. Now notice we didn't actually type this, we just used the ampersand. And like I said, that just gives us, it's as if we were just saying echo out that, because it's a parent. See, it's within those braces. We can extend that even further. We can say ampersand dot grandchild. If I could type grandchild, and we'll say color equals pink. So now if we had a div of grandchild, and we say test, see that color's pink. The difference between these two is that we've put a space in there. So now it's as if we said echo the parent class and then add whatever else we've got. So parent child.grandchild. Pretty cool. That's nesting. So now we can also use variables. If we come back to our SASS and we have a look at variables, see we can use variables like this. If I just copy and paste that. So now if we were to say font stack, so we want children to have a font family of that, and we want parent to have a font family of that. So now everything should have that font name. If we were to change this and make this, for example, Comic Sans, what have I done wrong? So now we've changed everything just by changing one variable. We've changed that throughout the entire page here. So that's just a few things that SASS gives us. If we view the compile there, you can see it's just replacing that variable with the text that we've declared in the variable name. So variables are great for things like fonts, colors, primary color, secondary color, tertiary color, if you're using a color scheme. Very, very handy. I use lots and lots of variables when I'm working on projects, just because it does mean that essentially I can take a CSS file that I've used in one project, copy it, paste it into another project, and just change some of the variable values, and then I have a working CSS file that I can use in a number of different projects without having to handcraft it all from scratch. Very, very handy and saves a lot of time. So let's jump in to see how we can actually use this in Visual Studio. So what we have is a basic MVC template. I've just done this from scratch using the wizard, and I've created this global CSS file. So you can see within here we've got some pretty stock standard CSS, but this is the guy that I want to concentrate on. So in our index file we have a jumbotron, and then within that you can see within that element we have an h1 tag. So if we have a look at what that looks like, this is the page here. So you can see that h1 in our CSS is using Comic Sans. Alright, so basic CSS. So now that CSS file has been included into our MVC project via this bundle. So we've created a bundle, we've called it CSS, and then we've incorporated the global.css file into that. So in our layout page we're doing a style render content, and then that's the name of the bundle, content CSS. So that's how we've got to the point that we are here. If we inspect this element, go to our head, you can see there the two CSS files that were included in that bundle. They're not minified, but that's just because we're working in a development environment. And then here within our jumbotron we have our h1 tag. So let's get SASS installed. A really important thing to understand is that SASS doesn't just work on its own. We've got our SCSS file. Now I mentioned that we have this special syntax that we use. Now if you were to put this syntax into a straight CSS file, it wouldn't work. It may break, it probably would just fail and not render anything that you're not style anything that you're trying to do here. So what we need to do is we need to bring in some way to change our SASS structure into normal CSS. There's lots of different products out there. If you're using if you're using Grunt or Ruby, there's compilation programs that you can use, but we're very lucky in Visual Studio that there is a module which you can download which is called Web Essentials. Now I've already got it installed here, and these are just some of the settings that you can change. So you can tell it to recompile, you can tell it to minify, which minify just sort of strips out all the white space and line feeds and so on, so that it's really, really small. You can do all kinds of things with it. So let's go and search. So I've just gone to Google, search for Web Essentials. We've got, this takes us to this page. We want to download. Now I'm using Visual Studio 2013, so we want to download the right one for us, and we click download. So once we download, we'll run the installer. Oh, sorry, before that we need to, you click the download and it brings you to the Visual Studio gallery, and then we'll download that. It shouldn't take too long. So while we wait for that to download, we will jump over to here, and what we'll do is we'll just change this file from global.css to global.scss. Now at the moment, Visual Studio has no idea what to do with that because we haven't got Web Essentials installed. A few seconds left. So while we wait for that, let's build our SCSS so that it'll work the way that we want it to. So I showed you in the CodePen that we have nesting, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to nest this CSS here. So we have Jumbotron, and then within that we have an H1, and we want to make that a font family of that. Now at the moment it's not going to know what to do with that, but it will once we get Web Essentials installed. So let's save that. Okay, and let's go ahead and we'll get Web Essentials installed. Actually, this might not work because I've already got it installed. But if you follow those instructions, go through download and then install the installer, you may need to close down Visual Studio and then reopen it again. So let's assume that that's happened because I've already got Web Essentials installed. So this is what you should have once you've got that installed, which is why the icon does actually look as though Visual Studio understands what we have here. I've changed that extension to SCSS and it does know what I'm trying to do here. So you could either rename a CSS file or you can right click and add. We say we want to add a new item and then just call it whatever you want to call it. Okay, now watch here, when I save this SASS file, watch what happens. Okay, well, it's not doing what I want it to do. I might just shut down Visual Studio and start it up again. Okay, so we're back up again now. Now you can see the difference between a CSS and an SCSS file. The SCSS file now appears to be a parent with it looks like a folder. Now if you expand that, you can see the CSS that gets compiled by the SCSS file. So if we open that up, so you can see that our CSS is created by the Web Essentials compilation of our SCSS. Okay, now with SASS, going this way from SASS to CSS is automatic. Web Essentials does that for us. But if you were to make a change here in the CSS, font family equals Arial, as soon as you go back and edit your CSS, your SASS file, those changes that you made will be overwritten. So once you've started working on a SASS file, you need to keep working in that SASS file. Now, like you can see here, a SASS file can take straight CSS. You can type an entire SASS file full of CSS and not use any of the SASS functionality at all. It's entirely fine. But you can also use the SASS goodness. So if we create our Jumbotron, within that our H1, and we want our font family, I think we had Comic Sans. Save that. Now I've got the CSS file open, so it prompts us to tell us that something's changed. So now, see, the SASS has been rendered down to Jumbotron H1. So if we refresh that, I'm going to have to rerun it because I shut down Visual Studio. And there we go. We've got a Comic Sans H1. Let's change that and make it something else. Let's make it Agency FB. Save. Now it does take just a fraction of a second for the compilation down to work. And now we can see we've changed. And looking at our CSS, it's just automatically doing it for us. It does put some comments in there for us. That's it really has no impact on the code that we're writing at all. Also, what it does is it doesn't. What I did was I had a global CSS and I renamed it to SCSS. Now previously, because I had a CSS file in our bundle, I'd already put that CSS file in there. If you were to create a new SASS file, say if you were to create content.scss, when you add it to your bundle, you should always use the CSS file. I think I said earlier in the screencast, SCSS, if you were to include SCSS in there, a web server doesn't know how to interpret that. It knows how to interpret CSS. So what you need to do is you're using SASS to make it nice and easy to write readable and usable code, but the CSS file is the one that gets put onto the site, onto your website. So always make sure that you use the CSS file in your bundle. Okay. I hope that helps. If anyone's got any comments, feel free to add them below this screencast. Also, please rate up the screencast. I'm trying to put more time into this screencast so that I can get them out a little bit more often. I've just started a new job recently, so that's keeping me quite busy, but if I find that I'm getting some interest from out there from all you guys, then I'll try and put some more time in and I'll get some more things ready. I've got a lot of ideas on what I want to talk about. It's just a matter of time of putting them together. So please rate up this screencast wherever you found it. try and give it as high a rating as possible. That'll show me that what I'm doing is reaching some people, and I'll talk to you again soon.